Welcome back to the continuation of this series, what you need to know as a worship musician, music theory, ear training, demonstrations. That's what we're doing in this video for the concept of chords. So hopefully it goes without saying, but you will need to understand scales before you can learn anything about chords. The terminology that we use is going to be related. It directly comes from scales and the terminology that you use to describe and learn about scales. So if you don't know about scales, go to the previous video. It's the basis of music theory that we are using to play songs on Sunday in church. Most chords are built from 3 notes, and we call these triads. Triad, 3-note. The main difference between a chord and a scale is the size of the interval that each is created from. Scales are built from stepping through the notes, 1 note at a time through the musical alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, while chords are built from skipping over notes. So you would go A, C, E, G, etc., skipping over notes in the musical alphabet. Also, similarly to scales, we will also number the notes in a chord. And the way that we number the notes in the chord comes directly from how we number the notes in a scale. Let's take, for instance, that we are playing in the scale or the key of D major. Let's just say D major. So the root of the scale is D, and it sounds like this. Has all of those notes in it, starts and ends on D. It's a major scale. The D chord, also sharing the root note of the scale, that's the first note of the scale, and it's also the first note in the chord. Now, since scales are built from steps, chords are built from skips, we skip over the second note in the scale and we get the third note in the scale. So it's the third note in the scale, and it's also the third note in the chord. And then we skip after F sharp, it is in this case, we skip over the next note in the scale and we get A, and that is the 5th note in the scale. It's also the 5th note in the chord. So the scale starts on the first note and goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then you're back to 1 again. But the chord is 1, 3, 5, and after 5 comes 1 again. So we are skipping over a whole bunch of notes, and we only have 3 notes in there, 1, 3, and 5. We can do this exact same thing starting on any note in the scale, and it can be any note in any scale. Let's say we start on the second note in the scale, which happens to be E in the key of D major. The root of the chord is E. It starts on the second note of the scale, and the notes in the scale that we're playing are 2, 4, and 6. Instead of 1, 3, and 5, we're not starting on the first note, we're starting on the second note. However, the notes in the chord, we still number them 1, 3, and 5. So this is 1, 3, and 5 as an E root note, and 1, 3, and 5 as a D root note. They sound completely different. There's the first chord, and there's the second chord. So hopefully that's really clear. I know the numbers get really confusing because there's just so many things that we use numbers for in music. There's the numbers in the scale and the numbers in the chord. That's the context difference, and the context is everything. Beyond that, we also use the numbers to name the chord in place of the note name. So the first note gives us a D chord. We would call that the first chord. The second note, E, gives us an E chord. We call that the second chord because the root note is the second note in the scale. Now, of course, we can play a chord with the root note starting on any of the 7 notes in the scale, and that chord will be named after whatever note you start on. So in the key of D, if we pick the note B to be the root of our chord, we skip through the notes in the scale until we get 3 notes, and that gives us a B chord, which is the 6th note in the scale as well, so it's also the 6th chord. These are the 2 ways that we name chords, either by the letter name or by the number name. But if we want to use the letter name to name the chord, the letter itself isn't good enough to tell us everything about that chord. We also have to tell, is it major or is it minor? The difference between a major and a minor chord is actually a very, very small difference. And for this, we're going to use those half steps that we learned about in scales. So the distance from the first note to the third note in a major chord is 4 half steps. Let's take the A chord in the key of D major, the 5th chord. This is a major chord in the key. And between the first and third note, A and C sharp, there are 4 half steps between those notes. Also, between the third and the 5th note, C sharp and E, 3 and 5 in the chord, there are 3 half steps between those two notes. This goes for all major chords. They have this pattern. Now, minor chords are the opposite. Let's take the F sharp minor chord in this key. This is a minor chord. It's the 3rd chord in the key. The distance from the root to the 3rd in a minor chord is 3 half steps. So from F sharp to A, there are 3 half steps there. And from the 3rd to the 5th in a minor chord, A to C sharp, well, we just heard that the distance from A to C sharp is 4 half steps. So major and minor chords have the opposite formula of each other. The number of half steps between the root and the 3rd and the 3rd and the 5th are opposite of each other. It's 4 half steps and then 3 half steps in a major chord, and 3 half steps and then 4 half steps in a minor chord. If we were to go through the major scale and play all of the chords, this would give us a pattern of major and minor chords. So the first chord in a major key is a major chord. The second and third chords are minor. And listen to how those sound. And then the 4th and the 5th chords are major again. Listen again to how they sound. And the 6th chord is also a minor chord as well. The 7th chord. Is a special kind of chord called a diminished chord. It's a kind of minor chord that we don't ever use in contemporary praise and worship music, but it is used all over the place in all other kinds of music. Here's what the 7 chord, the diminished chord, sounds like. This applies to every single major scale, every single major key that exists. The pattern of chords goes major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, and then the diminished chord, which we don't use. So all of that is to say, if we are going to be naming chords using the letter names, it's a lot more cumbersome. And if you make a mistake, it's easier to miscommunicate the kind of chord that you're trying to tell someone how to play. If you just tell somebody to play a C chord, they're going to assume that you mean play a C major chord. And that's because you have to say, play a C minor chord or a C diminished chord or C augmented chord if you want them to play something other than a major chord. You have to say what kind of chord you're going to play. On the other hand, if we're using the number system and we're using numbers to name the chords, as long as everybody knows what key they're playing in and the pattern of major and minor chords in a major key, you can call out a chord progression using the numbers and everybody will know, because 1, 4, and 5 are major, 2, 3, and 6 are minor. Everybody knows exactly what chords they're going to play, as opposed to saying, let's play E minor, A major, F sharp minor, D major. That's a lot slower, more cumbersome, harder to communicate, harder to remember as well. It's just a lot more information. The numbers are wholly better and wholly more useful to use in any musical context. All right, now a little bit of demonstration using your voice, using an instrument like the piano or whatever instrument you play. I recommend everybody know how to at least find their way around a keyboard. It's the king of Western instruments for a reason. We should know how to use it. Everybody on the team should know how to use it. Even the sound engineer should know how to use a piano. Pick any scale, any key, any chord, and try and sing that. That's a major chord that we're trying to sing here. should be able to hear and sing these notes that we're playing. Sit down, play the chord at the piano, and then just try and copy it. Try and mimic it. Think this is a major chord. This is the sound of a major chord. Now when it comes to minor chords, we have to think a little bit differently about the notes, and we have to hear what's different about them. Let's take a C minor chord. Let's go out of the key of D major. Let's do a C minor chord. Try and sing it along, copy it, think this is the sound of a minor chord, this is what a minor chord sounds like, this is what a minor chord feels like. If you want to be ambitious, pick a key and try and sing all of the chords in that key. Let's take the key of G, because that'll fit into my range a little bit better. And then 2, and then 3, and then 4, 5, 6, and of course you can skip over the 7th chord, but you can try it out if you want to. And then you're back to the 1st chord again. Here's why this is important, and here's why I'm spending time teaching this, and why you should spend time learning this. There's 2 things that are involved in playing 4 songs every week in a worship band. The first thing is confidence. You have to have the confidence in yourself to play the right notes. You have to have confidence to remember the words, to remember what the song is, to remember everything about how did I practice the song, how am I going to play it. If you have confidence, then that will minimize the second thing that's involved, and that's nervousness, or in other words, the lack of confidence. Build confidence by building your musical abilities. If you don't build your musical abilities, you will never build your confidence. And every single week for the rest of your life, you will go up on stage to sing a song, and it will be, ooh, can I do this? Or, ooh, I'm not sure if I can do this. Or, ooh, there's this part of this song that I just am still not sure about. I just don't know if I can do that. Now ask yourself this question. Was God confident when he created the universe? Do you think that there was anything that God created that he was unsure about, or that he second-guessed himself when he was making it? Of course not. God was not unsure about anything. He had total, pure, complete strength, power, confidence in what he was doing when he created everything that exists. Nature itself and everything in nature points to the Creator and the complexity of nature, the thoughtfulness, the care, the design in nature. Everything points to being created by Him. Part of our job as the worship team is to be a reflection of that strength and that confidence and that power, to point to Him, because that is the whole point of worship. It is to point to the Creator as being, this is the guy who made all of this, and say, this is here, and this is here because of the Creator. That's the whole point of worship music. Learn music so that you can be confident. Be confident so that you can point to the Creator and to be a better worship leader.